All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the patience. So in this NSF CNH project, a little bit accurate. But anyway, we study how the three elements, human demography, livelihood, and ecosystems interact with each other. Well, the major question we ask is what changes happened since the GTGP implemented in about 2000. The second one is what mechanisms, driving forces are behind the changes. The third one is what efforts can we do to make the green efforts really green, not forced green, which means they make the environment more sustainable and more resilient. So this is a concept framework, and then this is in this stage, I'm trying to give you an example of ecological modeling to show how we modeled the habitat or the animal behavior. So here we try to understand the animals. So this is the golden monkey. This is a precious endangered species in China. China has two treasures. One is giant panda. The other one is the golden monkey species. Of course, golden monkeys, there are some different, golden monkey species. So what we do is we take some plot samples, vegetation samples. We train students and local rangers, and we conduct some camera trapping. Of course, we collect data, we process data about the environment, how the animals behave on the ground. Well, the second one is about how we understand the landscape. We collect data, then set the imagery in the 3 years. Okay, this is before the year of implementation of the Green Initiative, which is GTGP. And these 2 years are after the implementation. Of course, we did all the corrections and the ratifications of the setting of the imagery. Then we performed a wide range GIS spatial data analysis. Later on, I'll show you the results. So from here, this is the landscape and the cover. We say this is a mixed, forest. The red spots are bamboo. Bamboos are pretty good. It's good food for the pandas, but not food for the gold monkeys. So forth. So this one is the forest cover. Basically, this is Kennedy forest cover in 2015. Okay? So we see we have different cover. In some places, well, if this is dark, that means there is non-forest or there's cloud. Because the imagery, there's cloud, we cannot identify what's happening on the ground. So this one is the CFC change or the forest canopy cover, how much change has been detected. So here, if it's a kind of a reddish, there is this is a negative. Oh, not negative. It's yes, negative changes. Okay, but if it's bluish and dark, then there's positive, which means there's increase in terms of forest cover, which means if the cover is like this, that means the forest cover has increased, partially due to the implementation of the Green Initiative, in this case, GTGP, and maybe FFEBC program. Okay. Well, once I talk about that, let me talk about how we model human behaviors, on the landscape. So in this case, we try to understand the people. Take samples, human samples. We sampled some human households. We trained students at a local college. It's called Tongren University or Tongren College. Then we conduct interviews, and we check the data quality. Of course, always we have to do things like that. At that time, we didn't have AI. We got to do it by ourselves. There's no, synthetic or CANs or diffusion model generation. Okay, we got to do it line by line, word by word. So let me give you an example how we understand human decisions. So here, I try to understand, to model the human migration or household or local people's migration decisions, because at that time, even now, some coastal cities or big cities like Beijing, Shanghai, there are many job opportunities, and rural people in my nature reserve, they turn to move to big cities and find jobs, get higher pay, and send money, remittances back to their home, to their homes. Usually what we do is we use some kind of AI, random forest, or regression analysis, we use covariates. Okay, well, but surprisingly, we didn't account for the interactions or the mutual influence among households. Maybe within this neighborhood or this spatial area, could be within a bigger area. So the people talk to each other, they affect each other. As a result, the data about these households, they are not independent at all. For regression analysis, we have to make sure our data are not correlated with each other. They are relatively independent. So in that situation, we cannot directly use the data we got from the survey or from whatever. Then we have to minimize, we have to filter out the correlation among data. What I use a method called eigenvector spatial filtering. This method is used in my research to, in this case, we still can do regression or random forest or whatever, but we add some of the random vectors as independent variables. With this, then since we are interested in the BI coefficients, xi is a vector for independent variables such as age, gender, education, like maybe social network and so on and so forth. We really want to know what the BIs are. They positive, negative, significant, or insignificant? Without adding this one, this BI could give you a wrong or give me a biased, idea. But with this, so this one tells you the true story, more likely the true story. Okay. So in this case, what we found is for migration out, all these factors, okay, more laborers, younger people, they tend to more likely to migrate out. Okay, GTGP has a positive influence, which means if a household has some GTGP and enrolled in the conservation program, the people in the household may be more likely to migrate out. But on the other hand, the FEBC, the other conservation program, does not have much impact on their decision making about migration. Well, we got an incident or accidental finding. At that time, I turned to, because I'm kind of quantitative geographer, I did correlation. I think everyone in this room knows correlation. I plotted FEBC, the area that invested on the program, versus GTGP area. Of course, I take logarithm because there's some data extremes. Okay. What I found some small to moderate correlation between a positive correlation. Then my question was, is that really an extended finding, or there is some mechanism before these two variables? What's the reason? Well, my next example is going to show you the use of the traditional data and also to do human behavior modeling using a bottom-up approach. Bottom-up means we consider individual people, animals, or whatever agents in our model. We don't aggregate them and just look at the generic patterns. So in this case, specific features or heterogeneity play an important role in our modeling results. Of course, we have time dimension. We want to keep track of their movement or their changes over time. So in this case, my team built an agent-based model as a platform to integrate the systems. So here you see we got agents, monkeys, people, households, and we also have the environment. Okay. So they interact and affect, or they are affected by each other. For example, between monkeys and the environment. Okay. Because the monkeys have some preference on the habitat. They prefer some species in some elevations, in some aspects, the topography. At the same time, people, they affect each other's decision-making and activities. For example, in terms of migration, if one household migrates to Guangdong, a rich province in China, maybe they are going to bring more from the same village. Okay? At the same time, people and the monkey interact with each other. My monkeys here, they are shy animal species. They don't like some other, like my cats, they can, sometimes play with people. They come to you and beg food from you. These animals know they are shy species. Once they know people are around from 200, 100 meters away, they are going to run away. course, people and environments, they collect fodder, fuel, and so on. They are going to decrease the forest cover, and deforestation is their impact. So this is the, my part of my Python code. So it's not original Python code. I put a pseudo code to give you an idea about how we initiate the environment and also how we study the monkey movement on the landscape. So if this condition is satisfied, then there's a random one for the monkey. Otherwise, the animal may turn back. Okay, so this is the pseudocode of the Python code for this agent-based model. So in terms of results, it's interesting. So from here, this is year 0 at the time of our study. After 10 years, so what we say, if we implement the GTGP, the environment program, then we can say the monkeys would occur more in the edge areas, okay? Because people are migrating out or they restrict their activities to affect the monkey the habitat. However, of course, this is the differences. Okay, so the increase comes more on the edges. So after in 20 years, okay, still we have two programs. Either we pay nothing or we pay 250 yuan per move. One move is about 1/15 acre. Okay. Well, in this case, if we pay more, we double the pay. Then this is the difference in terms of the monkey visitation or monkey frequency. So, so we can see there's more monkeys occur in the edge. So in the edge areas are usually frequently visited by the people. If they don't get paid, they still live a subsistence, lifestyle. A surprising finding is, no matter how much we pay or not, over long term, there is a convergence of the data, which means we pay more or less, but once the program is ended, then they are going to return their former, lifestyle, which means how much land they are going to use. They still, grow that amount of land, they grow potatoes, rice, cattle, and so on and so forth. So in that regard, so this is consistent with the PES, payment for ecosystem literature, which means there's a lack of, permanence for all these conservation programs, which means once the program is gone, the people would return to their previous lifestyle. So our results, just demonstrate the same findings by other people. Well, let me come back to the extent finding that I just mentioned. So here, I said probably this is an accident finding. Then I wanted to find if I can find more evidence in other parts of China. So yes, I talked to a group in Guizhou. So this is the finding, overall finding from my nature reserve in Guizhou province. What we found is 1 unit of funding for the FEBC program. It's going to generate almost 9% of actual enrollment on the other program, which is good. This is a positive environment spillover effect. Well, the next thing I want still to focus on using the local data and also traditional data. I want to let you know if that finding is by accident or by chance, or there's something really happening on the ground. So at that time, I was lucky to talk to my friend, Hong Hei Song, a geography professor at UNC Chapel Hill. He's right now the chairperson of that department, and also his great PhD student. Well, they happen to have a similar program, a project like I had, and we also did the survey and modeling another nature reserve in China independently. We didn't coordinate with each other. At that time, I didn't even know him. So, well, fortunately, they also collect data about the FEBC and GTGP program. What they found based on their data, 1 unit of investment on FEBC, it's going to generate almost 10% of actual enrollment, for the other program. this is amazing to me because, as I said, we didn't know each other, we didn't coordinate, but we found very similar results. That gives me more confidence about what we have found. Well, an explanation of our work is if this holds, then for whole China, that's actual or bonus or spillover effects of one program to the other. It's going to generate 0.46, I would say, million hectares of enrollment of GTGP program. If we convert this one into carbon sequestration based on average data, okay? In some places higher, some places lower. The average is going to be over 1,400 billion tons as carbon sequestration. That's a big environment benefits. Plus, well, I have talked about what we found in China. Then I want to ask a further question. Is this finding only about China or is all over in other countries? Then I switched my attention to the US. Fortunately, in the US, we have a similar program that is called CRP, Conservation Reserve Program. Under this program, it's kind of like a China's GTGP. It's a retirement of farmland and grow trees, and that trees grow, you get carbon, sequestered, and so on and so forth. At the same time, there is an environment quality incentive program. This program is not retired. It's about some environment-friendly practice. Let's say here, once with the donors paid to this household or this farm, CRP money goes here, then they grow trees. So it used to be for not for crops, okay. But here, once they get money here, they just perform some so here trees, they perform some environmental good practice, such as pay attention to air pollution, pay attention to water pollution, some make sure their farming activities do not generate too much pollutants in the air or in water. Okay. So what we found at the same time, we found in the enrollment for CRP has been increasing. Then there's some fluctuations, but ever since 2008, 2007, there was a steady decline for the enrollment. What's the reason? Well, we don't know. So for that purpose, what we did is we collect data for both programs, the GTGP, the EQIP and CRP, for all the over 3,000 counties in the states. So our data collection unit is counted up, okay? Of course, for the continental US only. What we did, so we collect the data about enrollment in CRP, enrollment in EQIP, population size, income, the total area of the county, the total farmland area. We use the United Nations, Sustainable Livelihood Framework to model the relationship. So what we found here is for 1 unit of EQIP investment or efforts, it's going to generate, 0.22, or let's say for 1 acre enrollment in the EQIP, it's going to generate on average 0.22 decrease of the enrollment in the other CRP program. Then in this case, it's a negative spillover or negative environment surplus, effect. What's the reason for that? Let me, not the reason. I'm talking about what we can do based on that finding. So if this is in the US, so in this area, only CRP. On the one on the right, only EQIP, but the one in the middle, these are places, both programs are eligible, and farmers or local landowners can enroll in both. Well, so in this case, because EQIP has a higher payment and is more beneficial to the local farmers and local people, then more likely they are going to enroll the land that's better, maybe that's most appropriate for CRP, but because of this higher, benefits or economic, payment, they are going to take that out and enroll in the other. Okay, so in this case, the total enrollment would be the same, but the government has to, or the taxpayers will have to pay much more to get the same conservation area. What if well, as a result, what we can do, if we change the eligibility of these two programs, we make, this piece of land is not eligible for both programs. What we do is, because this one, after change of the rules, they can enroll in this area, but for this area, it's still, maintained as a CRP program. So in general, after this small change, the total number of circles would be the same, which represent the total amount of conservation effectiveness. But we got 5% of budget cut without any effect on conservation in terms of the total area. Okay. In terms of the CRP plus EQIP. Of course, they are different influences, but in this case, we assume there is a concept in conservation, science about the total amount of conservation areas, measures. Okay. The next one I want to talk about using a data science approach is about using the local data from local to global scale. Okay. So far, I have talked with local data or country level data and so on. But right now, I want to say how we extend or extrapolate our efforts from local scale to a global scale. Well, based on findings we got so far from China, from the US, then we want to know if that's a spillover effect. Is that a global effect or is only, makes sense to US and China? What we did, we went a further step. We collect data in a total of 15 places, on the Earth. So we got data in North America, South America, Asia, Europe, Australia, and so on and so forth. So what we found is, first, if there's no spillover effect, 1 and 2, the circles represent conservation of green programs, then this rectangle represent their effect. Well, if there are no spillover effects, no interactions, they stand alone as they are. However, we found some negative spillover effects. Once 1 has a negative spillover effect over 2, program 2, then the program 2, the decrease in the environment conservation, consequence or benefits can decrease by 22% up to 100%, which means this program basically has no benefits generated. Well, on the other hand, this is the China's case. These two programs, because they have a positive spillover effect, then once the existence of one program may guarantee or may generate 9% to 10% of actual benefits, or in this case, the enrollment of one conservation program. In some other instances across the world, we find once the two programs affect each other, then the positive benefits can go from 25% up to 310%, which means 3 times as big as it was. We compared the situation without any spillover effects. So that's a big discovery. What we actually found is we call that concurrent green, efforts. So this is one conservation program, one effort. This is another program, another effect. The behavior generates some, gains or carbon sequestration. And this may lead to changes or modifications in policy. So we see a circle, it's an inner circle. Well, in the same way for another program. So many times, two programs are implemented or money goes to the same land parcel. Or if they don't go to the same land parcel, they go to the same recipients. So we call this concurrent grant efforts. So we found across the world, there are many concurrent grant efforts, even though they are concurrent, but there's no coordination. There's no study about interactions. Researchers just assume the other, do not exist. They just do for their own convenience, okay? So what we found is the spillover effects, behavior, if they are independent, okay, this is the case. But what we actually found is one policy may affect the behavior expected by the other policy. And the change in one behavior may give rise to, carbon sequestration or other environmental benefits that's expected by the other program, and so on and so forth. So in this situation, and we published a book with Kong Hei Song, Qi Zhang, and my collaborators at the UNC Chapel Hill 2 years ago, just talking about the spillover effect, from local to global scales. Well, the next one I want to talk is about new forms of data. So for one, issue I cannot talk too much. I want to say for wildlife protection, biodiversity, and carbon, and so on and so forth. Well, in this situation, I guess I'm going to skip this. The questions to be addressed is, given an increase in average temperature, say by 1 degree Celsius, say in the next 10, 20, and 30 years, what kind of feedback and responses we can expect from the animals? Okay. What feedbacks and responses we can see from invasive species? Okay. In China, figured out on the US, we got many plants, invasive species. I will give you an example later. And also from in terms of carbon and water cycling, and also how about grassland, wetland, and forestland? What kind of dynamic we can see on the landscape? Well, in addition to this, we assume this is a statement, this is cool, without any government intervention. What kind of policies can we design to affect all these changes? Okay, so in this case, maybe we can change their cultivation style, energy production use, and public transport. So I want to give you a quick question about, the Chitwan Valley. This is my new study area, because the Tiger-Sino-US relationship, I had to move my second thing as later on it became the diocese program. It discontinued last year from China to Nepal because of the political, problem. Let me see if I can open this. Okay, this one still works. This is a movie that we took from our drone. So just take a look at what's happening on the ground. Did you guys see something interesting? Something is moving. Did you see? See this? Actually, that's a rhino moving on ground. Okay. So with a huge amount of data like that, we can do some decent analysis. Well, in Chitwan, the national in this Chitwan Valley, so this there is a national park. At the same time, there are humans or people. They are around outside the national park, in the buffer zone or in the villages. Well, in this case, they have a community forest program, which means the local people, they manage and harvest and get benefits from the community forest. Okay. The community forests, on the one hand, they are for, subsistence livelihood, but on the other hand, the community forests are designed for carbon sequestration. So they are both a dual purpose. One is subsistence of local people. The other is environmental protection in terms of carbon sequestration. Of course, there is human-tiger conflict. This year, I heard maybe 4 people may die because of the tiger attack. Okay, carbon-tiger conflict. There is sometimes overprotection problems because they focus too much on carbon sequestration. Then tiger may lose some of their habitat, okay, because of the land climate change. And there is a mechania, which is invasive plant species, which is a vine species. Once they climb on the, on the trees or any whatever vegetation, then over long time the trees may die. And also there is a climate change induced migration. People go to Middle East countries. So in this situation, well, we got so much data. How can we, deal with data? We have all this data, in our data archives. So the good news is we can use AI or in my situation, we can build like a GNN graphic neural networks. I think so. Here, a good example is some researchers have developed experiments if they, shoot some particles, A, B, C particles. We know their mass, and we know their electricity, and we know their speed. And okay, we connect data. So, but just by using the GNN method, we can, without any pre-assumptions, we can detect the Newtonian function for the, in terms of F, the force, G's gravitational constitute, M1, M2 are the mass of any two particles. So R is the distance between the two particles, and G is the constant. Well, in this case, without any prior knowledge, but just based on the data, we are able to uncover this Newtonian norm, which is great. What the intriguing part for me is probably we can use the same idea to model animal behavior. Why the animals or people go this way or the other way, not the other, go this way, not the other. So here I want to give you an example of what we can do. What we are doing here is we got data. In this case, let's assume it's camera trapping or radio pointer data for the animal behavior. Okay, if at the beginning we assume we have nothing, we don't know anything about this. We just start from the data through a certain AI or deep learning method called reinforcement learning. Okay, with to minimize a certain penalty function or maximize a certain benefit function. Okay, we got environment data, we got some nodes and links, like a human, because artificial intelligence or neural network, when it mimics the human brain or animal brains with so many layers, so many links together. We can find the best way to replicate the data. But usually the problem is the nodes and links are good, but we don't know what they are and how they look like. We want, how can such data or how can such finding help us to understand the animal behavior rule? This is what I'm interested in. I'm not only interested in prediction. Prediction is important, but I want to know the mechanisms behind the data point. So what some researchers have been doing, and what we are doing also, is to use a regression tree to translate or to uncover these hidden layers of the neural network. Okay, nodes and links. So as a result, once we translate or uncover that, then it may become some of the rules we can understand. For example, with season data, animal data, if distance is less than a certain threshold, then once it's satisfied, it does this way, or it's not satisfied, it goes the other way. Okay, so in this case, of course, that's good. Well, sometimes if we do have some prior knowledge, that would be better. We have some prior knowledge, okay, as input to this training neural network. We also have data that may increase the efficiency of our training. No matter what, so in this case, neural network can help us to fine-tune or polish or improve our theory, development, which is a new area for me, like agent-based models. We want to know the rules behind some of the decision-making of the agents. Well, the next one is about ecosystem modeling. So as a whole, we want to integrate all the aspects using data from local, global, traditional data, and new data. We use bottom-up approach and top-down approach, all the things together, what we can do. So right now, this is one new frontier in my research but all the ones on the left is my previous research. Right now, I'm working with some ecosystem models to study how the nutrients, carbon, nitrogen, and so on, they are recycling, from water to atmosphere, to different elements of the Earth system. How, in this case, how human decisions and changes in land use in the cover chain may affect this thing. So what I want to do is to build a link between these two systems such that they are not independent with each other. Actually, they're integrated with each other. So well, so on the other hand, I'll give you an example. This is how we figure out ecosystem model simulate CH4 method, on the natural ecosystems. Okay, so I believe this code is written in Fortran language that's not very popular today, but some ecosystem scientists still use that. So what we do is for the ABM we built, we translate or import the results into the Fortran code, and Fortran code. This is one way to do it. But in future, in the long term, I'm going to do a close, tight coupling in it. What that means, we don't say, oh, okay, this is the ecosystem, the Earth model is ABM. We want to use AI to train the both. Okay. In this case, for example, ABM, we have so many data. Okay. And also the Earth model have so many data for so many output. We want to let them to interlink when using, let's say, GANs or using diffusion models. And at the same time, we use large language model to as the interface between people and this model, because sometimes they have very different data forms, they have very different models, and they have very different spatial and temporal resolutions. It's hard to integrate all these models together. Just a few days ago, we submitted a proposal under this diagram. We want to make sure the data can talk to each other, the models can talk to each other. The data or the outputs from one model can be seamlessly used in another model. That's the beauty of AI, especially the LLM, large language models, and also diffusion models for the GAN, generative artificial intelligence. So, well, so in summary, this is my research framework I have explained. So here I want to mention just as my last slide, mention the complex system theory that I have been working. If this is the target population of humans, and this is the target environment, and we study the ones at short distance, also at long distance. This is my advice, Jack knows, kind coupling or net coupling framework. But at the same time, we study a lower level processes and agents or the environment, which gives the details about what's happening on this level. However, the focal or current complex systems is controlled by even larger, complex systems. So if this is the village, so this could be the country or the province. Okay? At the same time, what's happening on, right now, at this time, present time, is controlled by what happened in the past. So the previous, interactions among agents, interaction among environments, local, remote, and distant, environment may affect what's happening right now. And in the same way, what's happening now may affect in the future their interactions with each other and how the environment, local environment, remote, and the distant environment may affect with each other. So in this case, the complex systems has all these features. Hierarchical structure like this, timeless is as this horizon. Heterogeneity, all the different colors represent the different features or characteristics, and feedback. So all the arrows means feedback. Of course, emergence just means some surprising outcome. 1 + 1 is going to be bigger than or less than 2. Okay. Lastly, I want to just mention a point that I started and I learned when I was a high school student. At that time, I'm pretty much like this one. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Then the second paragraph, hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is barren field, from them waste. How many of you know this one? Okay. I think well, of course, he died in 1967, long time ago, but this is the one I know. Okay, thank you, and also for coming here or present to be here or to be online. This is my lab's website, my center's website, and my contact information. So right now, if we still have some time, let's take some time for questions.
So first, thank you so much for a very insightful talk. I remember when I was a student and I read your paper published in the Annals of Age comparing 3 different combination human system studies in China at that time. So it's great to see an extension of the study in addition to comparing the 3 previous studies. You're comparing US and China studies in here. I do have a lot of questions when goes through the presentation, but I do want to ask one question, which is about how to address the scale and neighborhood effect issues when integrating the social and the nature systems.
Okay, that's good.
Because for human making decisions, even for different factors, we may consider different scales. For example, considering crime rate, we may consider neighborhood level. We consider the economic opportunities, we may consider the city or even the state level.
Yeah.
But for animals or for nature process, they normally do not follow the human delineated or defined boundaries to make decisions. So I'm just curious, like your study, how do you address those inconsistent, scale and neighborhood effect issues?
That's a good question. Scale issues is almost everywhere. We cannot find a scale that's one fits all. So animals have their own scale, their own boundary, and human and so on and so forth. I think basically in this case, first, the domain knowledge helps. Because the monkeys, we have to restrict their activities within the boundary or make a little, within the buffer zone of the nature reserve. Because all the outside areas are occupied by the humans and the monkeys, they don't interact with people. So in that situation, we know there's a limitation for their extent. What? The second is for humans, and we also know by recognition, by our lifestyle, style. People go to some places, but they don't go to a specific place. For example, in the nature reserve, people can go to some buffer zone or some edge places. But if they want to go to the inside of the nature reserve, no, they can. On one hand, they are not allowed, but on the other hand, if they are captured, they got a penalty and a severe penalty. The third is if you talk about the integration, for example, something happens on a daily basis, something happens on a century basis, something happens on a yearly basis. In that situation, I think right now we can use AI or GANs model or diffusion models because when people from different disciplines, when they have their products, they usually generate their own format in their own spatial resonance, temporal resonance. How can we do it? Or if we do vaccine survey, we got connect data on science space. So in that situation, I think the GANs or the RAI models helps. So in my research, we are trying to use this site-specific data figure out to verify the large-scale ecosystem models output. So in that situation, even though the data are at different spatial scales, we can still do it. Just because for the large scale, predictions, we got some local data, access rate data available, then we can predict what's going to happen, what happened in that area. Then we compare with the site-specific data. So in that situation, I think that's one area AI can help is to seamlessly integrate data and models that operate at different spatial, temporal, and organizational scale. That's I think the beauty of right now. We live in an era of AI, technology. That's a blessing on one hand, but on the other hand, if we use it inappropriately, it could be a curse. Thank you. Good question.
Any questions from in the room? If not, we can take a question from online. But any?
Yeah, I can check.
To be equal.
I'm watching it, yeah.
Okay, so Dr. I ask a question because you are talking a lot about the green efforts, from local to global. How did you see from urban planning perspective, how the cities, because through a better design, will harness the complexity you reviewed here, right? So maybe the different cities, because of their different design approach or strategy, will like I say make a benefit from your model.
Well, I think
how a city stakeholder learn from you.
Well, I guess, think about this one. Well, a city or a village or a human community, I believe they are a complex system. Complex systems share the features of hierarchical structure, timelessness, heterogeneity, feedback, and emergence. In that situation, for example, if more people, go to a certain place, like, parking example, then that may generate some emergence. For example, maybe if say more people go over there and plant trees, that's going to increase the environment, not in a linear, way, but in a, exponential way. However, if some feature figure on the, in the park structure or in a certain, certain area, if more people or more, if you are studying animals or plant species, they come all together, then that might be some extra benefits or extra negative impact, just like what I presented for the two environments, conservation program. In this case, 1 + 1 could be bigger than 2, or 1 + 1 could be less than 2. So I believe in urban planning or landscaping architecture, that phenomenon may still exist over there. For example, if you do something together, have you considered, potential interactions of, for example, you represent one environment agency, I represent another NGO, we do the same thing on the same spot. Okay? Maybe we assume they do not affect each other, but likely they are going to affect each other. One may give you extra benefit, but the other one may cancel your fund, your consequence. So in that situation, we got to consider this kind of coordination or spillover effects from one organization to the other, one action to the other, or from one policy to the other policy. So that's what I can say for an urban planners and landscape architect, architects can learn from, this kind of a philosophical, approach.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Good, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Let's go about that.